Hello everybody, welcome back to my guide to New Who. For a quick guide to Classic Who, check out the description, and if you haven't watched the first video, go back and watch that. So, today we're talking about the first season of modern Doctor Who, believe it or not. The season began on the 26th of March 2005 with the episode Rose, and ended with the finale episode, episode 13, The Parting of the Ways, which was broadcast on the 18th of June 2005. The first series comprised 13 episodes, 8 of which Davies wrote, Davies being Russell T Davies, the showrunner of series 1 through 4 of the show, and Davies, Julie Gardner and Mal Young served as executive producers, and Phil Collinson as the producer. The first series features Christopher Eccleston as the ninth incarnation of the Doctor, his only series in the role. The ninth Doctor was an emotional incarnation of great sorrow and anger, plagued by the outcome of something we'll talk about later. Emotionally exhausted, he would break down when faced with pain, suffering or death. A mercurial individual, he hid his sorrow with a facade of manic energy, sharp, offbeat wit and enthusiastic confidence, but would quickly drop the masquerade when deeply displeased. Yes, I found that online. I can't write. I'm not going to write anything that descriptive. But everything else I wrote myself, so I think I'm going to be forgiven for that. The first episode of the series, entitled Rose, serves as an introduction for new viewers and a reintroduction for old viewers of the show. The episode introduced the Ninth Doctor, Rose, who would be his companion throughout the series, Mickey, Rose's boyfriend, and Jackie, Rose's mom. Those two would both appear sporadically throughout the season, in comparison to the Doctor and Rose, who were in every episode. This episode also reintroduced the Classic Who monster, the Autons, who were controlled by the Nestine consciousness. The Autons were essentially window shop dummies, because the Nestine consciousness had the ability to control plastic. This worked very effectively in the 70s, and arguably works better now. This episode is absolutely ridiculous, I must point out, and yeah, it's really good. It's a great introduction to the show for people who, have never seen it before, or for, once again, people who are coming back to the show after a long time, as we've not had any Doctor Who since 1996 with the movie. So, the one thing you've got to keep in mind is it's pretty, you shouldn't take it seriously, because there's a killer bin at one point. Because, whatever's plastic can be used as a weapon. Near the end, the Doctor faces off against the Nestine consciousness, and something to note is that while they're talking, the Doctor mentions something about a war. More on that later. Anyway, overall, pretty good start to the series. Episode 2 is called The End of the World. Believe it or not, it takes place at the end of the world. This is the first story to take place in the future, and is therefore an introduction to this type of episode. So the Doctor takes Rose to watch the Earth be consumed by the sun, because that's something someone from Earth would want to see. On the satellite, they're joined by a number of creatures, most notably the face of Bo, who we'll talk more about in later videos, because he's a bit important, and Cassandra, who claims to be the last pure human, although she is just basically a bit of skin on a... I don't know, just a bit of skin that they push around. It's a bit of a murder mystery, and once again, it's very weird, but necessarily, so people know what they're in for in the future kind of stories, because obviously there are going to be a lot of aliens in them. One thing I thought to mention is that another one of the aliens says to the face of Bo that being trapped on the exploding Platform 1 is a classic Bad Wolf scenario. Bad Wolf? What's that, you ask? We'll talk about that in a bit. Anyway, at the end of the episode, the Doctor explains the Time War. So, in classic Doctor Who, the Doctor's race, the Time Lords, were all alive and well, and apparently in between the 8th and 9th Doctor's era, the Time Lords and the Daleks, you surely know what a Dalek is, fought in a war, and the Doctor was the last survivor of it in general. The last of the Time Lords, if you will. Overall, this story is pretty good. Not many people seem to like it. I think it's pretty entertaining. But next up is The Unquiet Dead. The Unquiet Dead is the first historical of the show. The new series loves doing historical celebrity episodes in which the Doctor meets someone famous, usually British. This wasn't really what the historicals were about in the classic series, though. Don't get me wrong, it still happened. For example, the Doctor met people like Richard the Lionheart or Doc Holliday. It was just very rare. The old episodes focus more on the era rather than a specific person, but the person in question is Charles Dickens, and because it's Dickens, obviously we're fighting ghosts. It's a Mark Gatiss script, more on him later, and I think it's quite underrated. Another thing of note is that Eve Miles plays a psychic character named Gwyneth. This is significant for two reasons. One, she mentions the big bad wolf to Rose, and also Eve Miles will go on to play a main character in Torchwood called Gwen. I think it's safe to say they're related. What's Torchwood, you ask? I'm going to do a video on it later, so don't worry about that. Overall, fine, underrated, but still not amazing. Next up is the show's first two-parter, and it's not a very good one. The Doctor takes Rose back home, but instead of being gone for 12 hours like she thought, Rose has been gone for 1 year. This episode obviously sees the return of Jackie, who's rightly pissed at Rose, and Mickey, who got accused of killing her, so is also rightly pissed. The story introduces the Selene, which are farting aliens. Great. I like the design, but they go a bit too far with the farting thing. It also introduced Harriet Jones, who appeared in a couple more episodes of Doctor Who later on. Mickey's offered us space on the TARDIS at the end, but declines. Also, the first part features a character called Toshiko Sato, or Tosh, and she would end up being a main character on the spin-off show Torchwood, which, of course, I will probably do a video on at some point. Overall, it's a fun two-part. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's probably one of it's probably the weakest story of the season, because this season is pretty solid. But anyway, moving on to the next episode. Episode 6 is called Dalek. Now, you might remember that there are supposedly no Daleks left. Well, it turns out one survived, and a guy's keeping it in his museum, which also contains a Slovene arm, a Cyberman head, and possibly the ship from City of Death. But anyway, here we meet Adam, a super genius who joins the team at the end of the episode, much to the dismay of the Doctor. It was more Rose who wanted him around. The episode was adapted from a Big Finish audio drama called Jubilee, starring the Sixth Doctor, both written by Rob Shearman, and you can clearly see the difference between the two, although they do share similarities. This episode's great. With only one Dalek, it makes the Daleks a force to be reckoned with, and is arguably the most effective the Daleks have ever been in the new series. Also, we hear that a helicopter's call sign is Bad Wolf 1. Interesting. Overall, one of the best of the season. If you're only going to watch one episode of this series, I would recommend this one. It's bloody great. It's interesting to see the last Dalek and the last Time Lord go up against each other. Episode 7 is The Long Game, in which Rose, the Doctor and Adam end up on a space station called Satellite 5. It's worth noting that on TV we see the face of Bo again. What channel, you ask? Bad Wolf TV. Simon Pegg is in this episode, which is nice as he plays the editor, although apparently, if not for scheduling conflicts, he would have played Rose's dad. This becomes especially annoying in Season 2. So Satellite 5 is essentially a news broadcaster, and apparently, if you do well enough at your job, you get to go to Floor 500. Supposedly, on Floor 500, the walls are made of gold, and you never come back because of how great it is. Spoiler alert, it's not that great. Turns out the editor, and therefore the whole human race, are actually being manipulated by something else. That thing is, and here we go, the mighty Jagrafess of the Holy Maxarodon foe. Quite a handful. Eventually, the Doctor and Rose obviously win the day, while Adam does nothing but try to mess with history. Then the Doctor kicks Adam out, and he's never seen again. No, that's it. He's just done. Unless you count some comics, but maybe I'll do a video about that later. Overall, it's one of the weaker episodes. It's just there to set up the finale, really. Now, as I said earlier, Simon Pegg was supposed to play Rose's father. We see her father in the next episode, Father's Day. Rose wants to go back in time and see her dad due to him being hit by a car when she was younger, so he's kind of dead. This led her to, understandably, save him. Unfortunately, this attracts a new monster, the Reapers, which apparently feed on places in history where time has been changed. Makes you wonder why they never appeared before or since this. This episode also features Jackie in the past and a much younger Mickey due to the nature of the story. Overall, pretty great. Also, a poster has been graffitied with the words, Bad Wolf. Another two-part would come after this, The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. This is definitely my favourite of the Ninth Doctor's era, and therefore, obviously, Series 1. And also, it's Colin Baker's favourite story ever, so that's fun. The thing is, most people would either say this is the best story or the finale, which we'll get to in a minute, because it is really damn good. This episode was written by Stephen Moffat, who would succeed Russell T Davies as the showrunner much later on in Doctor Who's lifespan. This episode takes place in the height of the 1941 Blitz. The Doctor and Rose are separated when Rose sees a child with a gas mask on a roof and goes up there to see if he's alright. She ends up hanging onto a blimp during a German bombing run, but fortunately she's rescued by a fan favourite character, Captain Jack Harkness, played by John Barrowman. Meanwhile, the Doctor also encounters the child, but a street orphan warns the Doctor to not let him touch him. The child constantly asks, "Are you my mummy?" I have a very good memory of watching this story with my friend who was scared shitless by it. He wasn't much of a Doctor Who fan himself, but he had seen a couple of episodes, and it was quite funny to watch him be terrified by it. And honestly, I get why. The Empty Child is creepy as all shit. The gas mask gives it a sort of inhumane feel about it, which adds a certain terror to it, and the lack of vocabulary as well. Overall, it's got a horrifying creature. It's very original as well. It's a great introduction to Jack, this episode, and it has Nine's best moment ever. And I won't spoil. I might do like a video about all the different Doctors at some point, and I'll have to mention that. And that, so if I ever do, I will certainly mention that then. But also, it's got a very creepy scene in a hospital. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Gave me nightmares as a child, and it's still pretty creepy to this day. At the end of the story, Jack joins the TARDIS crew, and there's a bomb that is going to hit somewhere at some point, and it's called Schlecter Wolf. Guess what Schlecter means? So before we get to the two-part finale, we had a single-part story called Boomtown. It turns out one of the Sardine didn't die in World War III and has been hiding out in Cardiff as the mayor ever since. I hope Jack likes Cardiff because he's going to be spending a lot of time there. Mickey shows up again in this one. Honestly, Nye, Rose, Jack and Mickey, even though it's one episode, is my favourite TARDIS team, like ever. This episode is miles better than the last one that features the Sardine. It's more focused on the nature versus nurture thing and whether the Sardine really deserves to be executed back on a planet. She builds a power plant in an attempt to blow up the Earth and escape, and it's called Blythe Drag, which translates to Bad Wolf. Pretty good overall. Bit underrated if you ask me, but oh well. On to the finale. It's time for the finale. Bad Wolf and the Parting of the Ways. Strangely enough, it starts with Jack, Rose and the Doctor on early 2000s TV shows, but with a deadly twist, which makes the episode a bit outdated retrospectively. Jack is on What Not to Wear, the Doctor is on Big Brother, and Rose is on The Weakest Link. Well, on The Weakest Link, the android says, "Yes, that Anne. What ancient building was the Cobalt Pyramid built on?" The correct answer is Torchwood. It's time to talk about the end of the season, so either skip to the time code or go and watch the finale and then come back. So it turns out some Daleks survived thanks to the Dalek Emperor, and they've been controlling the game station, which is Platform 5 just 100 years later, and it's funded by the Bad Wolf Corporation, so it's probably time we talk about that. So the Daleks are coming to kill everyone, which they pretty much do. So the Doctor tricks Rose into going back to the present via the TARDIS. The Daleks then proceed to kill everyone except the Doctor. That does include Jack, by the way. The Doctor's built a machine which, at the press of a button, will destroy the Daleks. As a side effect, it will kill all the humans on Earth. Considering the Doctor did a similar thing in the Time War, he can't bring himself to do it because it's very hard for him. Meanwhile, Rose is disheartened back in present day until she finds Bad Wolf spray painted in a park. She sees this as a symbol that everything is connected and that she can get back to the Doctor. Fortunately, Mickey and Jackie help Rose open the heart of the TARDIS. Rose then absorbs the power of the Time Vortex and becomes the Bad Wolf. She heads back to the future, kills all the Daleks, and spreads the words Bad Wolf across time and space, creating a bootstrap paradox. She then uses her newfound powers to revive Jack as well. Unfortunately, the power of the Time Vortex will kill her. So the Doctor takes the energy inside of him, which is lethal for him. Well, kind of, and in an absolute jerk move, leaves Jack on board the game station. Jack would next be seen as the leader of Torchwood in the spin-off of the same name. Now, as I said earlier, unfortunately, absorbing the power of the Time Vortex from Rose would kill this version of the Doctor. I mean, it's better than Rose full-on dying, but this means he has to regenerate. So if you're a newcomer, you might be a bit confused. So a Time Lord, the Doctor's race, whenever they're about to die, can regenerate instead. This has the side effect of changing the Time Lord's appearance, personality, skills, etc. This can only be done 12 times, so a total of 13 versions. So this Doctor says a goodbye to Rose. Doesn't really explain it, to be honest, which would have been a good idea. He seems fairly accepting of his death. He has a nice final speech of sorts, and then he dies, regenerating into David Tennant, the 10th Doctor. Very sad scene. Ninth Doctor was one of my favourites. He's probably in my top 5 Doctors. I'm sure I'll do a ranking at some point. And it was sad to see him go. I do wish he did at least one more series. Series 2 would have been better if it was him, and then you could have had Series 3 and 4 with David Tennant, but we'll talk about that next time. This concludes my video on Season 1 of Doctor Who. Join me next time as we talk about a new Doctor, see the return of the Sidemen, and we encounter the actual devil. Yeah, the actual thing. My next video won't be a Doctor Who one, though. I'm going to be doing one on the Cornetto trilogy of Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. So if you're interested in that, or you've never heard of them before, then watch it either way. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you want. I don't know. Thanks. See you in a bit. Doctor Who is owned by the BBC. No copyright infringement was intended.